Please welcome back Mary Rowe.
Okay, Gold Star, we are at the penultimate end, the famous MAS Summit wrap-up session. And you can see I have two esteemed colleagues that have agreed to put themselves at the center of this happy discussion with all of you and to talk about what we've really sort of distilled over the last 2 days. And then we've got a great treat ahead of us because we're going to have a sneak peek at that opera. So I'm going to come and sit between these gals, these two, Gal and Guy. And they probably don't need any introduction, but this is Gale Brewer, Manhattan Borough President. And Dan Geiger, the business reporter for Crain's. So we've had a good time, and you can see they're stalwart, they're still here. We've been getting feedback and Twitter feeds. I should just mention my colleagues are extremely happy about this, that as a result of the MAS Summit 2015, we now have over 10,000 followers on Twitter. This is apparently very important to MAS. Twitter. And we sort of a general framing. So we've had comment cards and people have been providing feedback and lots of questions. And we sort of have collated the responses. We have stacks and stacks like this, thanks everybody, into these sort of 4 categories. And we're interested to hear what both of you would say to this. 4 sort of spheres of discussion: increasing affordability, both of housing and of small business and retail life, improving infrastructure, somehow in the midst of that, protecting economic diversity. So this concern about the homogenization of the city and whether or not we can fight that. And then how do we bolster resilience? And there's been a particular concern around absence of coordination, that there's lots of things going on, but we don't seem to always be able to track all the different things. So I'm wondering if either of you want to weigh in on that, those 4 themes, and then I'll give you 2 specifics. And then I'm going to put the house lights up, and you guys can call it a single word embellishments. One question we continue to have, which a number of people have raised, is should we say goodbye to as-of-right zoning? How's that for a mild little topic? And then the other question is there a way to get to see more robust leadership from the mayor on certain key issues? So put the house lights up, could you? And hands up, I just want single words, no speeches. Yeah, well, why don't we have Gale do that?
Yeah, as of right means it doesn't go through any zoning special permit. Example would be on an avenue right now at 69th and Amsterdam, where Lincoln Square Synagogue is. There's a building, it's fairly low rise, synagogue moved, and unfortunately it could be very, very tall because that's what the zoning allows for. So that's as of right. The community, we have no say about the height. It has been determined, it might be 1961 or more recently. And that's the answer.
And one of the dilemmas that we've got is that this sort of coalescence of 2 key factors, technology that allows you to go super high on a very small footprint, and also available capitals. All of a sudden, we see those super talls going up as of right. Do you want to say something about as of right?
Well, first, Gale, I wanted to ask you if you have any clue on what is going to happen with that synagogue site. I was just walking by that with my wife the other day. I said, holy smokes, this is going to be one of these big development sites. Right down the street, they just built a nice residential building. Pretty tall building.
It's going to be very tall, and it's going to be condos. And for those of us who love our neighborhood, it's very unfortunate that it doesn't have a special permit or ULURP so that we in the neighborhood could have some say about it.
Sure. I mean, obviously, that's a radical idea.
So other key things to embellish what I just suggested, my 4. Anybody have single words that they want to throw out that either of these 2 could respond to? Yes, single word, Jacqueline. Families. Okay. Anybody have anything else? Based on landmarks. Thanks, Jeffrey. Anything else? Yep. 197A. Yeah, what's happening with 197A? Anything else? So community-based planning, I think, is what you're asking about there. Families, I think, inclusivity, whether or not we can see that, and what's the role of landmarks. Okay, Dan, you go first, and then we'll go to Gale after you.
So we're going to touch on some of those words. I mean, I think the families issue is certainly a big one, right? I mean, everybody, you have a family in the city, and so much is about not only affordability, but, the schooling and all that other stuff. Because when you go to the private schools, it lays on a lot of extra costs, and that's a tremendous thing to bear. I mean, just thinking about this whole panel and seeing some of the the other speakers here. I mean, I think that, how do you even the playing field? Obviously, that's infrastructure. You're hearing even more talk, because I think some people, I think Carl Weisbrod the other day even said it, if I remember, that, he said that we're not going to get enough units of affordable housing to, create a kind of an environment for people to be able to really afford to be here of all strata, economic strata. And we're going to have to start thinking regionally. I know that's something that you see some of the big developers already starting to kind of, see if they can tap into. New Rochelle, there's a huge 10 million, I was shocked when I was told, a 10 million square foot development plan that's on the table in downtown New Rochelle. Obviously, that's outside of my coverage area. I'm focused on the city. But I mean, you're talking about a lot of development there and probably not a huge commute. Now, do people want to, accept living in Yonkers or these other areas? I think just inextricably, I think that the conversation, you're going to see it, is going to start to shift. And we're going to stop talking about just creating it within the 5 boroughs. That's just the sense I'm getting when I talk to people who are investing a lot of money in this kind of stuff.
And so are you suggesting your readership would say, well, we just can't put more affordable housing in Manhattan or the other 4 boroughs, and so we're just going to kind of give up on this and let everybody else
No,
live
I'm
in
not saying
boroughs?
that, and I'm not saying that
Just
it's
check,
not
I'm
a
just asking.
worthy thing. Obviously, and I think that the administration, mandatory inclusionary, there was just a panel on before that. I think they talked about a shocking statistic that all that development along 4th Avenue, you'd say, well, gosh, you'd look at it and you'd think, because I go there all the time, and you'd look at all those buildings and you say, wow, this is really a symbol of success. You had this kind of industrial derelict kind of an avenue. Most people in this audience anywhere wouldn't want to go there. You wouldn't want to hang out there. You certainly wouldn't want to live there. Now, of course, it's a thriving community, but it came at the cost of so much affordable housing. And I guess I didn't know that personally.
Right.
The mandatory idea, it's a good idea. I mean, I think I'm saying
I just
some
want to make
obvious
sure
things.
that a Crain's reporter said it was a good idea.
But no, I think it is a good idea, because imagine that had been done. What I think I'm saying is that it's a little bit on some level because of the, just the sheer numbers of people that we have in the city today and the sheer numbers of people who want to be here. And it's not just the wealthy people, it's from
Right.
all economic strata.
Right.
And it's a little bit of closing the barn door after the horses have left. I mean, we're creating it now.
Or we could say closing the barn where we're here. I mean, people are here.
Yeah,
Right?
I mean,
People want to live here.
And they want to live here. I think that any way you can create, and this is another thing, I talked to Seth Pinsky, and he's a great guy, and I think he's smart, and he thinks strategically. He certainly has, opinions about this stuff. Part of the equation is obviously creating, I just want to insert this into the discussion. It's so important. You don't hear it enough. Part of the discussion is obviously creating the affordable housing, but also creating the jobs for the folks who are going to make the money. Now, that sounds simplistic, but Crain's we just went up to the Bronx. We had we just do these borough tours, and I'll say it quickly, and we were sitting with all these folks. Ruben Diaz was there, but all these businesses from the Bronx, and some of them are folks who are in the digital end, who are coding part of this digital economy, and they're based in the Bronx, in the South Bronx, and they're kind of outliers. They talk about it. They say, we're the only ones here. And there's a tremendous local workforce that's young kids who are in school, and they could be learning this stuff. And I think the point they were trying to make, and I haven't dug into it, so I don't know of all the programs that are there or not there, but that they're not getting the kind of training. And these people could have $90,000 a year jobs, and they could be part.
Right.
You want to call it gentrification.
So you're saying some jobs in place, like to actually create.
They could be working there.
Okay.
Those industries could be flourishing there. They could be living there, and they could be part of the whole rise of that neighborhood.
Right.
Not
all in New Rochelle. We can still have some.
Not all in New Rochelle.
all in
I think New Rochelle is another. It's
We
just
love New
another piece of
Rochelle.
the
Anybody
puzzle.
that's from New Rochelle? Madam?
We just had lunch, all 5 borough presidents, and we talked about some of the.
fun.
We have so much fun together. You
bet you
cannot imagine.
I would have liked to have been
Surprised
there.
me a bit.
Oh, we went to the Morris Jamal mansion, and many people had never been there. It's the oldest house in New York, and we had fabulous fun. 2 hours of sheer politics. You cannot imagine. But we did talk about some of these issues, and I have to say, you got to live. If you talk about families, you got to live not too far from your job. People are commuting now from Pennsylvania. So if you've got children and you've got a family, you have to live somewhere near your job or transportation that can get there quickly. So I'm really a big proponent of the 5 boroughs. I heard about those other places, and I know we should talk about regional, but I want to focus on the 5 boroughs if we're going to have good jobs here. Second issue is this landmarking issue. It's a hard challenge between the landmarks and preservation and new construction and how you meld the two. So we just had with Councilmember Dan Garodnick, we just spent a great deal of time on East Midtown.
Yep.
And it was to answer your question about planning 197A, these discussions with all the stakeholders and coming up with guidelines and principles that we have just done, and you'll see soon on East Midtown. We've done it. I hope it works. But the issue is we took a look at how the landmarks perhaps have a larger sphere in which they could sell their air rights so that they can maintain their roof and their consistency into the future as preservation. So we have to think about our landmarks because there isn't a lot, particularly if you're a nonprofit landmark, to keep you going. So to me, the landmark and the preservation is equally important to the future. And that, to answer your question about, as you said, community planning. The 197As are great. I think sometimes like around Manhattan in Board 9, Columbia, I'm a graduate, I like it a lot, but they paid no attention to the 197A plan that Community Board 9 did. So I think the better way is to take all the stakeholders, maybe under the auspices of 197A, developers, community, et cetera, and try to come up with something that might be called principles and guidelines, because you can't really be more specific than that. And we've done that with South Street Seaport, we've done that with East Midtown, and I think part of the planning processes that are going on in East Harlem and Inwood somewhat mirror that. I mean, there is a lot, hopefully, that will come out of that kind of discussion. So there isn't any easy way. I'm big focus, as you are, on the mom and pop stores. It's one of the biggest challenges, maybe even bigger than affordable housing, because what is the legislation that will permit mom and pop stores to stay? On the other hand, you also don't want to make sure that, you want room for new stores to come in. What do you do about the vacant stores? All of this discussion is something that's on everyone's mind, and we don't have one definite answer to that question. And that comes up in terms of families. Because if I want my kids, I have to say I'm much more comfortable going to the local pharmacy where I know the guy, because I know that the prescription and the child meld. And I like to be able to call that person and know him as a friend. So all of that is part of a neighborhood. That's neighborhood building. So you talk about families, you talk about landmarks, and how you fit in the affordable housing is tough, because at least in Manhattan, we understand if you're going to have affordable housing, then the building has to be tall. That's the kind of concept that we're being offered. And that's what we have to discuss, because that's a challenge in Manhattan. We have contextual zoning. We want the hills and the valleys. We don't want every taxpayer low-rise commercial building to disappear. That's also part of our light and air. On the other hand, the construction unions, understandably, the jobs, as well as developers, want a taller building in order to succumb to the possibilities of affordable housing. These are such challenging issues, and it's great that everybody has been discussing them, but as part of the process, you do look at some of the challenges that you have. I must admit, if it was a possibility of having as of right something that had to be involving the community, I would love it. You cannot imagine the pressure to not do that. And I'm sure there are people in the audience, for me even to mention it, think I'm total wacko. But because the process is long, and the numbers of lobbyists and engineers and architects that get hired at each step of the ULURP way is phenomenal, and the agencies are understandably swamped and slow, and so if you did that, then development would slow down, and the jobs slow down. So these are the balancing that you have to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is one of the reasons that organizations like ours exist, because sometimes you have to, I mean, cities are about improvisation,
Yeah.
I think. And one of the dilemmas we've got is that some of these processes we described, whether it's landmarking or 197As, it takes a long time. It's very complex. And are there ways that we can still instill the same principles, have a commitment to the kind of what we call a complete neighborhood?
Yeah.
And maybe that's part of our challenge as a civil society organization, all of us, to try to help government actually to move expeditiously as it can. Because the difficulty is if you get too balled up in the process, too many rules, then actually everything slows down. And then you don't actually make any progress at all, right?
I don't want to forget the artists, and I'm sure we would agree, the artists, be it housing, be it creative space, be it studio space, are really the backbone, another backbone of New York City. And I want to thank the East Harlem community, because PS 109, which is a new 90-unit beautiful artist housing, former school.
Right.
A lot of credit goes to Speaker Melissa Mark Viverito for making it happen, and Art Space, which is a nonprofit developer, and the wonderful nonprofits that are in the first floor, on the first floor. That's a kind of creative thinking that we need. Artist housing, artist space is equally important to all the families, the landmarks, and the planning.
And all part of a complete neighborhood. We've had some interesting examples over the last 2 days of people talking about great particular initiatives for affordable housing, for all these kinds of one-offs, I guess. That's one of our concerns. Are they one-offs? Is there a way to kind of have them more coordinated? And I think I'm interested in your constituency, the business community. Are they wanting more certainty, more rules and regs from government? Or, this is a very general question, not very helpful. Tell me. React to it anyway, Dan.
More rules and regulations.
They're all over that. More clarity, I guess. Would more clarity help?
I will tell you this. That in terms, I write about real estate, so I'm very focused on the regulation there. And I just wrote about a site that was on the west side that could have been the biggest residential building in the entire city. Probably will be at some point when someone buys it. It was Silverstein Properties bought a Mercedes dealership. It's right at the mouth of the Lincoln Tunnel. It's not the most attractive area. You're talking about on-ramps and a lot of traffic going this way and that way. But they had a plan, and they were going to do this. And I think that they had a sense of frustration with the administration for months. You aren't, as a reporter, and any of us, we're not actually in the room, so we don't see the discussions, but we get a sense of them. And there was a frustration about what exactly they would need to deliver in terms of the affordable housing.
Right.
And, if you want to talk about clarity, they knew that there was going to be a restriction there, that they were going to have to deliver something. And somehow there wasn't a meeting of the minds. That is leading, I think, now Silverstein's got that site on the market. I think that people know the general gist now, and I think they know what's required from the administration. It's settled in.
Right.
You're talking about a development site that they had been in the process of buying for the last 2 years. So that period of time, 2 years ago, a year ago, you weren't as sure about what exactly you were going to have to deliver.
Right.
Now it's pretty clear. So I think obviously regulation. That's the thing about, when you're talking about, land prices, and you're talking about, well, land prices are so expensive, how can you afford to build? If you set the rules, if you tell people, if you tell everybody across the market, you say, listen, here's how it's going to work. Because if we just say there's not going to be a bonus, I know, Gale, you're saying we can't have a city of just ultra-tall buildings everywhere. Anyone who's got any sense of city planning would agree with you and say that, of course. But what they're trying to do is they're dealing with that land prices are already, they're not going to go down. No landowner's going to say, you know what, we're going to just cut you a deal because I know you got to build 30% affordable housing now. They're going to want their price. So they're doing this inclusionary bonus, obviously, to be able to allow the affordable housing to happen. Otherwise, it's just like no one's going to do anything.
To create some incentive, sure.
So I think as soon as you let the regulations be known, maybe what I'm saying here is obvious, but really get it out there and make it clear, and you're hard and fast about it. I think it does create movement. Everybody realizes, look, I'm gonna have to either mark my land to market, or I'm not going to sell it.
Well, and I think similarly, people that are asking for more community engagement, and we have a number of comments about that 197A, they're asking for the same thing. Just make explicit what the process is so that we know how we can engage and so we can get a sense of what the timing is. I think that's a lot of what people's reaction is to New York is it feels as if it's kind of out of control. How come I didn't know about this? How come I didn't have an opportunity to intervene? I don't actually think the business interest and the community interest are that different in that regard, that they'd like to be able to have a sense of what does the playing field look like, what are the rules of engagement, and how do we move forward to get the kind of things.
Yeah, I mean, every developer I meet with understands that the city needs affordable housing because they need workers.
They need workers.
But they need the certainty. You're absolutely right. They need to know that, because they think generations. They think decades.
Right.
They don't think tomorrow. They can't think that way. So if you're thinking, 10 years from now, you can't know that at year 2 and 3 you're going to have a different scenario in terms of policy. Right. So they do need to have that.
All right, well, so while we're thinking about tomorrow, let's just ask our favorite question here. The favorite question for all MASers, of course, is, can we still build big here and still have respect for the granular and all the local things? Do you think we can actually move on the topic that's at the top of your notes there? Penn Station.
Well, I mean, I think it's great that in the city council, when I was in the council, I was there 12 years, and towards the end, we voted for a 10-year timeframe.
You
You
did
have
indeed.
10 years.
Now we're at 8.
Now we're at 8.
Tick, tick,
Exactly.
tick.
And so we're ticking, and I think that the time, we in the Borough President's Office are going to bring together you and many of the stakeholders to say what should we do here, but I think there's a feeling that things should be done differently. And so I'm looking forward to the tick, tick, tick and getting something different.
Done, done, done.
Done, done, done.
Dan, what about your people?
I mean, I think that, there's probably the development community. When you talk about selling air rights, everyone's going to want to know. And it's funny because everyone's talking about these air rights now. You got
Yeah.
air rights over whatever it is. You want to sell air rights, Moynihan Station.
Right.
The bus terminal. There's a lot of ways to monetize these assets right now and create money for infrastructure spending. I don't know what's going to wind up happening with Penn Station, whether you'll be able to uproot MSG. I think a lot of people would love to see something like that. And I know that Vornado and Related in 2007 had a great plan for how that would look if you could just take that sewer cap off of, Penn Station. And actually,
Everybody hear that? The sewer cap.
Yeah, I mean, you could kind of, no offense to, Rangers and Knicks
none
fans.
taken, I'm sure.
But, and I'm sure, but it really impedes the station. No one would disagree with that. You look at the pictures of the old station. I mean, that's, you're just shocked. But I think there's an interesting opportunity to be able to monetize some of these assets. I mean, yesterday the Port Authority said we're going to start really studying how to move the bus terminal. And, a big part of that is, it's going to be a $10 billion plan, but they'll make some billions of dollars off the real estate. So it'll.
I mean, I don't think there's a shortage of dough, right? I mean, the question is, how does it get channeled and harnessed for the public good? I guess that's what we would always be.
Yeah, and I think you brought up also, Mary, we shouldn't lose track. There's so many of these big projects going on right now. You've got Gateway, and you've got LaGuardia, and you've got Penn Station, and you've got the bus terminal. How do some of them line up? Are there, public-private partnerships that you can do?
Right.
Do some of them complement one another, where you can literally combine some of the infrastructure, and you have two $8 billion projects, but if you do them together, you spend 14 instead of 16
And
billion.
how do we engage the community around that to make sure that all the local granular stuff that's already there is strengthened? Yeah.
We did something interesting in East Midtown. We said if you are going to build, you have to, as was done at 1 Vanderbilt, you have to put in infrastructure.
Sure.
Could be subway. You have to build open space, as an example, which I know a lot of your discussions were a part of. And you have to look at the landmarks, supporting the landmarks. You have a choice. But as you are building your building, you have to put that as your priority before you start building. And you know what? The developers are happy with it because it's certainty. They'll know what they have to do. They can put it into their plan. So that's another way to look at some of the things we're doing.
Absolutely right.
These big projects, because we're shooting ourselves in the foot if we don't think about infrastructure, open space, landmarks, or other things that might come up as what's neighborhood related.
So on that comprehensive, holistic note, would you join me in thanking Dan Geiger and Borough President Brewer?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thanks, man.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.